So most nights, I'm going to let the people that are here that have questions drive the direction that we work in this session. This session, technically, for this course, doesn't exist, right? This course is a completely online course, right? Normally, you would just do this sitting at your computer and you would go through the videos and solve the problems and do the exercises and so on and so forth. So technically, really, this is not really part of the course per se. We felt because this is an introductory course, a lot of people first time they may be at CUNY, then first time they may be taking statistics for a long time, first time using Blackboard for many of you. We felt that we needed some phase time to go along with that. So this is really kind of a review and help session. This first time out, I'm gonna do something a little bit more formal. I'm gonna go through how everything is gonna work in the course. Basically what your responsibilities are, what mine are, how Blackboard works in relation to this course, and so on and so forth. So right now, you guys should be able to see my screen and hear my voice, and there's a chat box at the bottom that you can type into. Right now it says PH750 because that's the old number for this course. I'll edit that one of these days. If you can type into the chat box that you can hear my voice and clearly and see the screen, I'd appreciate it. So you guys can't see that here. Okay, good. Thank you, Nisha. We already know about you, right? Terrific. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Excellent. So I'm going to get started, and we'll talk about, remember, the format right now for this week is going to be a little bit more formal. In the future, it's really going to be generated by questions that you have online or in person here. So I'm going to get started with this, and we'll talk about what's going on in this course. Okay, what do you need? Well, you can see on Blackboard, we got on the syllabus and on various areas for the course materials, you need a textbook. The textbook is free. It's an open source textbook, so that really helps. It's actually gotten pretty good. It's third edition at this stage. And you can just download the PDF file and read it on the computer. I'll show you on Blackboard where to find the links to download it, so you don't have to write anything down right at this moment. If you prefer a printed copy, there are 3 places where on Blackboard on the course materials, I'll show you again, you can buy a printed copy from anywhere from about $10 to about $30. I think Amazon, somebody told me Amazon is having a sale on the color printed version for about 20 or, what was it, 20 or 25? $14. Oh, no, okay. Oh, if you're a Prime member, but I think if you're not a Prime member, it's probably if they charge you for shipping or something like that, probably. Yeah. So it's really cheap. So it might be worth getting a printed copy of it. If you like trees, you can stick with the PDF version. I kind of like PDF version. You can always have a PDF version also because obviously it's a download. It's free. Nice thing about the PDF version is you can do searches on it very quickly, as it is with all of them. In this course, we ask you to complete a certificate on a organization called cityprogram.org. That's a certificate in ethics in human research. Okay, so the deal there is that sometime during the next 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that you're here, you're going to be taking other courses, EPI, public health, and so on and so forth, where you may be dealing with humans in a research environment, human subjects. You may be dealing with data that's collected from human subjects. So you have to be trained on how to handle that ethically. You'll read all about internal review boards and so on and so forth. Nowadays, before someone can do a study, it has to be reviewed by the organization's internal review board to make sure it's ethical, that the people that are going to be involved in the study is not being exploited or put in danger and so on and so forth, and really understand what's involved. So part of that is making sure that you guys know what the rules are. And that's what that's for. And it's a good thing for everybody anyway, and it's really interesting reading. It's basically 3 to 6 hours of reading online with little quizzes in between. You can go back and take the quizzes as many times as you want, so you don't have to worry about flunking and having to start from scratch or anything like that. And at the end of it, you'll be able to print out a certificate. There's a spot in Blackboard I'll show you where you'll be able to upload it so that we know you completed it. You just need to get it done before the end of the semester. I encourage students to get it done early because if you're taking any other classes, if you're taking 2 other classes, at the end of the semester, you got exams, projects. Last thing you want to have to do is 6 hours, of your time taken up with that. So do it early if you get a chance to do it. Okay, so we want you to do that. Now, next, let's see. When you log on to it, you'll see there's a bunch of choices you can make. One of the first things you do is you create a logon with your email address and so on and so forth. You select the organization that you're with. You could be, if you're working in an environment where you do this anyway, and they're part of this, you can choose that organization, a hospital or something like that. But otherwise, for most of us, you're going to choose CUNY, City University. It might not say CUNY, it might say City University of New York, right? I don't think it's going to say School of Public Health because we're kind of new, right? Like this is like really recent. And you want to choose a version of it that involves ethics in human research, research involving humans, and you can choose behavioral science or one of the other choices as long as it includes human research. Okay, if you've done it already, if your certificate, some of you may work for organizations where you may have done it already. If your certificate is more than a year old, we ask you to do it again because it kind of like they kind of recommend that you do a refresher every 3 years or 5 years. So if you've done it 3 years and you're going to be here for 3 years, kind of like you might age out or you might expire out of the process. It doesn't really expire per se. So if you've done it more than a year ago, you can just do the refresher portion of it, which is maybe a couple hours rather than the whole thing, right? So that'd be good enough. And if you've done it somewhere else recently, you can just upload that instead, and I'll look at it. And if I have an issue with it, I'll let you know. And if not, you can just go ahead with that. You need access to Blackboard because everything we do is going to be on Blackboard. How'd that work out? Not yet. Oh, okay, we'll figure something out in a second, in a little bit. So the next thing you're going to need is that we're going to be working with software. Okay, the primary software we're going to be working with is Microsoft Office programs, basically Excel and Word, or the equivalent. Okay, because we're going to use Excel for some calculations. In fact, tonight we're going to play around with that a little bit. And Microsoft Word or an equivalent word processing program, because you're going to want to be able to, like create documents and upload them as for assignments and so on and so forth. But you're already doing that in all your other courses. We're also going to ask you to use a program called SPSS, and that's called SPSS stands for Statistical Package for the Social Sciences. It was purchased by IBM about 5 or 10 years ago, so it's now IBM SPSS. And that program's specifically designed for doing statistical calculations. Excel is a general program for doing all sorts of calculations. SPSS is a form of vertical software. It has a specific function for statistical programs. There's a couple of ways you can do this. One way is that we're lucky enough that now there's a version of it that you can run on a virtual desktop. What that means is that you can download software to install on your computer at home that will allow you to access a version of it that's running on a server here at the School of Public Health. So it opens up in a window and it looks like it's running on your computer, but it's really running here. The downside of that is that you need a good internet connection for that to work, right? Because obviously if it's here and your computer's at home, you need a way to communicate. The other downside of it is that sometimes those things can be a little bit tricky and buggy and sometimes crash and stuff like that. So you'll see when you install it, they warn you, like, save your information save your documents or your data on your own computer frequently in case there's a problem with it. Personally, I haven't been able to get it work yet because there's a little issue with my login. It won't accept my login will work. You have to use the CUNY first login, and my login works to log into CUNY first, but for some reason it won't accept my login for running the virtual desktop. I'm waiting on ISA to kind of resolve that for me as well. You may have an issue with it too. The other alternative is to rent it. They lease this software as well. IBM leases this software. There's a discount for students. You can get a 6-month lease for about $40, $40 or $45. Okay, that allows you to install it on your machine and use it on your machine for 6 months. You can also get for about $75 or $80 a 12-month lease in case you expect to take EPI next semester and use it there and so on as well. Okay. Now there's a couple of versions. The base version, which is the cheapest, about $40 for about 6 months. That version will do everything we need to do in this course. There's also something called a grad pack version, which is for 6 months is about $15 more, about $50 or $55. That version has some additional functions in it. For instance, it has something called linear regression. Don't worry about that. That's going to be the last week of the semester, right? And in fact, in this course, we're only going to introduce it or discuss it. We're not going to ask you to do anything with linear regression, so you really don't need it for this course. But if you think you might want it for other courses, or you might just want it because you want to experiment with it, you can go for the slightly more expensive. The version that'll work for us is the cheapest version instead. Just make sure there's a couple of places you can get it. There's links through the software page on the CUNY website, CUNY portal. You can go like places where you can get discount software. And I think they link mostly to a place called onthehub.com. There are other places also. Students have told me that they looked around and found versions of it for a few bucks cheaper. I think the cheapest I've heard is about 38 or 37 or something like that. So we're going to need that in one form or another. If you can't pay, if you're really tight for money, you can just work at the virtual desktop version until you get it working, or work with ISIT until you get it working on your machine. But if you can afford the extra 40, if you can afford the $40, especially since we're not paying anything for the textbook, you might want to go ahead and just install one on your machine because it'll be less buggy. You'll be able to use it when there's no internet connection and so on and so forth. So the other thing, the other piece of software, many other statistical packages that people use. There's one called SAS, S-A-S. There's a few others. There's another free one, open source one, called R. Okay, and there are overlays for that to make R a little bit friendlier to people that are non-programmers, such as something called RStudio. Install R, and RStudio gives you a graphic user interface. You can use that if you're sophisticated with this kind of stuff and you've used it before and you feel you want to learn how to program it and use it. You're welcome to use R or SAS or any other program. Mainly, we're interested in you being able to produce the statistics that you need and like put them into Word and upload them with your homework and so on and so forth. So I don't care where you get them, how you achieve that, but we'll support you in SPSS. If you want to use SAS or R, you're kind of on your own, except Levi's really good on R. So between me and you, if I put you in touch with him, he'll help you out if you have a real problem. Or we'll give you links where you can find training. But for the most part, the real support here will be in SPSS. Okay, that's my contact information. Right now, I don't have a working School of Public Health email address. They're working on that too, apparently. Okay, you can put, that's my email address, adevito@hunter.cuny.edu, and put BIOS610, says 611, and we're really 610. Put BIOS610 into the subject line, because that way it'll go into a folder that alerts me when I get a new one, so I won't miss it. Okay, just throw that into the subject line, anywhere in the subject line. 610, BIOS610. I typically return emails pretty quickly. Worst case, if I'm out on a fishing trip or on the beach or I've had a few beers or something like that, I might miss them. But you can pretty much figure within 24 to 48 hours you get a response for sure. Okay, so what's my motto in this course? My motto in this course is no man left behind. Okay, between me and your fellow students, if you start to fall behind, we want to find ways to get you extra help or extra places to find learning. For instance, maybe other YouTube videos other than what we create that are on. You guys have seen this already. That you can go onto YouTube and put in any kind of a question you want and find videos that show you how to do stuff, right? So in fact, there are many other schools and colleges that have these materials online. And if you don't get it the way we present it, there's a million other ways for you to get it. The other thing is that we're going to be making extensive use of the discussions forum on Blackboard. That discussion forum allows us to set up new threads where we can talk about different things. Among them, for instance, probably every week or two, I'll put up a new thread for the topics we're talking about in that period of time. So if one of you has a problem, you can put a question on there. And you don't have to wait for me to answer it. if another student knows how to answer your question, they can contribute to that. And other students as well, if they have more information to add to that. Okay, and in fact, 10% of your grade is class participation. Well, since you never really have to be in a classroom ever, that class participation is really what's going on the discussions board. So that encourages you, I think, to help each other out with this stuff. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, class participation is just as much asking the question as answering the question. So, and in fact, I think part of the first week, I've asked you to go online and tell us, what your interest is, how you wind up here, what you've done wrong in life that put you here, and so on and so forth. And what you see is your future, right? You don't have to get real personal. Just give us whatever information you feel comfortable with. Okay, and so yeah, tell us who you are, and that's on the discussion script. Okay, so you don't have to worry about this stuff. There's no real, but this is from the other class. Okay, now this session is going to be simulcast. In other words, if you have questions, you can ask them in the chat box. Let me see if anybody said anything. So far, nobody said anything in the chat box, no questions. Or you can come here in person, and I can help you out face to face, which is a lot of times that helps out quite a bit. Just so you guys online know, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people here in the class, and we got 6 people online right now. Okay, so the rest of the guys are probably still at work, but they're going to have the opportunity to see what we're doing right now, what we're saying right now, online on YouTube within 24 hours. It takes me a little while to convert it and post it. Okay, so okay, good. Okay, don't worry if there's technology issues or something like that. Don't worry, we always manage to get them worked out. Okay, so what is this course all about? Well, first of all, number one, a lot of what we're going to be doing is going to involve the software that we're going to be working with and learning how to apply that. Okay, when I took this course, that's the machine that I used. 1968, I took it at Brooklyn Poly, downtown Brooklyn on J Street. And that's probably the rents have gone up there a little bit since I took it, right? And we used mechanical calculators, weren't even, and if we had to multiply and we had squares and square roots, we used slide rules. You guys probably never seen. You ever seen slide rule? Anybody in this room? You're depressing me. So we started towards 69. We started to see electronic calculators show up, and eventually we started to see microcomputers get involved in this stuff. There were always mainframe computers, but generally they weren't available to researchers that were working with small sets of data and stuff like that. We used paper and pencil for a lot of the work that we did. A couple of guys designed the first spreadsheet program that works on microcomputers. It was called VisiCalc. Anybody remember the name VisiCalc? No, of course not. Why would you? Right, so VisiCalc was the first spreadsheet, right? After VisiCalc, there was something called Multiplan. Then after that, there was something called Lotus. Then Lotus, you might remember. Lotus 1, 2, 3. Anybody remember? No. And then eventually Microsoft published Excel and just buried everybody in, Microsoft Office became kind of like the default programs for most PCs and stuff like that. So, but this was the first one. Really, this was kind of like almost world changing. In fact, this only ran on an Apple II computer, right? That original one that they worked on in the garage only worked on an Apple II computer. And this is one of the reasons why people bought Apple II computers at that time. So really, this program, this software, was literally the first piece of software that people bought the hardware so they could run the software. So they, back in those days, used to have a term for that called a killer app. But anybody watch a show called, what is it, Halt and Catch Fire? No? It's on, I don't know if it's on Netflix or something like that. It's an interesting show about entrepreneurs in that period of time that were in the computer industry. Halt and Catch Fire. Okay, it's I think it's in the second or third season. It's pretty interesting. If you're interested in the history, it's not really history, but if you're interested in the atmosphere of the industry in those days, that might be kind of interesting to you. Interesting about spreadsheets, we're going to take a look at it. It's organizing data. It's basically a ledger with lines and columns, just like an accountant would use. It also has a way to embed formulas into those ledgers, and we'll take a look at that. The other kind of software that was you'll see used quite a bit in statistics are called database programs. They are programs that are specifically designed to handle, manipulate, sort, search through enormous volumes of data. You might hear the term every once in a while. It's called big data nowadays, where you're dealing with enormous amounts of data. Most people loosely define big data as the amount of data that's so big you can't handle it in a spreadsheet. It's way beyond the capability of a spreadsheet. Levi Waldron works with big data. He works with genomics, right? So when you're working with genomics, you're working with enormous quantities of information. You know, all those A's, C, T's, and so on and so forth. Okay, so databases are a part of this. We're not going to work too much with databases because we're working with smaller, more reasonable data sets. And SPSS, as I talked about before. First thing we're going to learn is that there's, as you've learned in the course already, in the material you looked at already, is that there are different types of data. And it's important that we understand the different types of data because we do different kinds of analysis on it. Okay, so the main kinds of data we're working with are nominal data, for instance. Nominal data is categories. Is categories like male or female is nominal data. If we extend that into something called categorical data, it might be hair color, might be name, last name, first name, right? They're basically names is what you're dealing with. When we're working with nominal data, a lot of times we're working with frequencies. We don't find averages of nominal data. For instance, if we're talking about gender, there's no average gender. There's just male or female, right? When we talk about numerical data, we term numerical data, we give numerical data a few different terms. We might call it continuous data. We might call it numerical data. We might call it scalar data. SPS tends to use the word scalar, something on a scale, like a ruler. Anybody give me an example of scalar data? Anything, right? Blood pressure, right? Height, weight, age, BMI, right? Anything that's on the number scale is numerical or continuous or scalar data. 3 words for basically the same thing. There's a special kind of numerical data sometimes that we refer to as discrete numerical data. And that's basically numbers that are numbers, represent numbers, but they're typically integers and they're usually small. For instance, if I asked you how many siblings you have, right? You might say 3. Well, that's numerical data, but sometimes we call that discrete because it's a little bit different than a number scale because normally you wouldn't have 3.5 siblings, right? So I don't like to use discrete too much because, in fact, SPSS doesn't even really distinguish between numerical, continuous, and discrete. It can get a little bit ambiguous sometimes, so you won't hear me use it too much, but you might see it come up in the book. The fourth kind of data is ordinal data. Ordinal data is categories like nominal or categorical data is, except that the categories have some relative differences. For instance, poor, fair, good, excellent. They're categories, they're words, right? Names. There's just names or categories. But excellent's better than good, it's better than, in other words, there's some relative difference between them that puts them into some order. Anybody think of another kind of ordinal data? Anybody work in a hospital? No. Yeah, pain scale. Exactly right. Right? You ask a patient on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain do you have? Oh, well, it's a 4. That sounds like a number. It's not really a number, right? It's a description. It's a name. 4. Your 4 may be different than another person's 4. And if the person tells you, oh, what's the pain now? Oh, it's a 6. Well, the difference between 4 and 6 may not be the same as the difference between 6 and 8. There's no way to define it. All you can say is it has a certain order, that 6 is greater than 4. It's almost like saying fair, poor, good, and so on and so forth, even though it sounds like a number. But that's ordinal data. Any kind of data that's like that is ordinal data. Okay, now we're going to deal with, our experience is going to be dealing with populations and samples, right? Population is everybody in that group. And a population might be everybody at CUNY, all the students at CUNY. Population might be the population of the city of New York. Population might be the population of the United States or of the world, for instance. That's population, that's everybody within that group. We are very rarely going to be ever working with the population or have knowledge of what of all of the population, like what the average age is for everybody in the United States. We're probably never going to know that, right? Except that there's a possibility we might, right? Why is there a possibility? There's one place where you deal with populations every 10 years. The census, right? Exactly, census. In fact, the census is interesting. We know, for instance, that when they take a census, that certain individuals in certain populations are undercounted in the census. For instance, we know that illegal aliens are undercounted in the census because they avoid census takers, right? They don't want to be involved with surveys like that or be identified. So we undercount. So we know in New York we might be undercounting 2% of the population, right? But we don't adjust for that. You know why we don't adjust for that? Because the Constitution says there has to be an actual count. It's not legal, even though we know statistically we could correct for that. We're not allowed to correct for that because the Constitution says it has to be a physical count. You can't say to yourself, well, gee, in this neighborhood we know 10% of people are not being counted, so we're going to adjust for that. Other statistics, we're going to do adjustments. We might do age adjustments. We might do other. In fact, that comes up within the next week or two. We're going to talk about adjusting data to take certain kinds of confounders out. But very rarely in real life do we ever deal with the population. Almost always we're dealing with a sample from the population, and we're trying to determine what the nature of the population is from that sample. So we might sample 100 people in the population of CUNY to try and get an idea of what the average age of students at CUNY are, or what the BMI is, or what the height is, and so on. Okay, when we talk about populations, any information about populations, we call that a parameter. When we talk about numbers associated with samples, we call that a statistic. When we deal with parameters, for instance, the average for the population, we use Greek letters. The average is mu, mu, the kind of like a lowercase u, represents the mean for population, but we use x with a bar over it for the mean of a sample. Okay. Similarly, sigma we use, and you'll see these symbols as we go along. We use for the mean of a population, and for the standard deviation of a population, we'll talk about that, and SD, or standard deviation, for the standard deviation of a sample. So we use those. We summarize stuff in tables. Graphics is a great tool for organizing data, displaying data, demonstrating it to people. This is a bar graph. For categorical data, we use bar graphs. Right? You can see that there. Right? That gives you the number of people in this sample that have black hair, blonde hair, brown hair, red hair. Right? The height of the bar is the number of people. That's a bar graph. Okay. This is a whiskey bar. Right. This is a candy bar, and of course, sushi bar. Right? That's as close as we get to a joke in statistics. By the way, you can hear a lot of a more relaxed version of this presentation is on Blackboard that we did for 611. We spent an hour and a half on that, so this is kind of like abbreviated. So this histogram is different than a bar graph because it's numerical data. This is people's heights, right? So if a person is 149 centimeters tall, they go into this bar. They're one of those 6 people. But if they're 150, they go into this bar. So they're always going to have a bar to go into. But they're not separated because it's a continuous scale. They're going to go in from one point to the other. So the bars are connected to one another. That's the difference between a histogram and a bar chart, right? That's a bar chart, gender, right? What kind of data is that? Nominal data, right? We use bar charts for nominal data. Numerical data, we use histograms. Okay, we also use box plots quite a bit. Now, the box plot, if you look at this, I don't want to walk too far away from this because you can't hear me. You look at this, these feathers, these little not feathers, these little hairlines here, right, at the top and bottom represent the lowest value and highest value A little bit more complicated than that. That's okay for now. And so the lowest value to highest value within that population. The bar in the middle represents the median, not the mean as it happens, but the median, the middle value. And this red box represents the range that represents the middle 50%. That is called the interquartile range. So the top of it represents the 75th percentile. 25% of the people got a higher score. 75% of people got a lower score. The bottom of this red box represents the 25th percentile. 25% were lower, 75% were higher. So this is 25th percentile, 75th percentile, right? So that's the interquartile, the middle 50%. What does that represent? That red dot at the top, do you think?
The outlier.
Yeah, it's an outlier. Bingo, you're exactly right. Right? It's a value that's so high, so different that you might question whether or not there was an error or whether or not you want to include it in your analysis. And so there could be a lot of reasons for that. But we'll get into this quite a bit.
Just a question
Yes.
on that one.
Sure.
So you mentioned the middle bar is the median, right?
Right.
Is there a description for the mean?
No, it's not showing on the box plot. It's only showing the median, right? In this particular on box plots. Okay, scatter plots we'll talk about later. Okay, yeah, we'll take a look at that in a second. Okay, so next thing I want to do is I want to go over how we're going to get the information that we need, what we're going to do in this course, how we're going to go through this course. So I'm going to go open up Blackboard. The view of it you're going to see is a little different than your view because it's the instructor's view, but for the most part, it's going to be very similar. How are we doing over there? Are there tutorials on the grad pack for SPSS? There's all sorts of tutorials on SPSS. I can give you links to a bunch of them. We're going to be, as we go through the semester, you'll see us working through examples on SPSS. But I can also give you some supplemental stuff that'll help you learn a bit more about SPSS if you're interested. So let's go to 610. Okay, so for starters, when you open up Blackboard, you're going to get into and go into the course, you're going to get into the announcements section. Whenever I put an announcement on here, I will send a copy of it out as an email. So that's why you get these annoying bings on your phone every once in a while that something's coming in and there was a change in Blackboard. In fact, if you go on there, I think there's even a place where you can tell it to alert you whenever there's a change or something like that. So for instance, whenever there's information about the class time or if the material's available, if there's a mistake somewhere that's been corrected, you'll see it in the announcements. Now these announcements, I don't delete them. I just leave them so they scroll. So if you want to, at the end of the semester, you want to see an announcement that we made second week, you just scroll all the way down to it. Some people don't like that. They'd rather have it cleaned up or something like that, but I tend to leave them there, okay, in case something comes up again. So for instance, this class, the reason why the people online know to come to this point is because, see, if you see me mix up 611 and 610, it's because half the time I don't know what course I'm in. Right? Please tolerate that. Obviously, I'm in 610 over here, lab session. Oh, no, you know what that is? That's I posted the lab session. Right, yeah. City program, SPSS code. Here it is. This is the link to our meeting tonight. That's how people knew where to go online to click. They click on that link. It brought them to go to meeting to this session. So they're seeing what we are doing right now. How many of us are there now? It's still 6 of us. Still six of them on there. Okay, so that's the link to this. So again, for those of you guys here a little bit late, this is really not, this is kind of a little extra thing. It's not really part of the course. It's totally online course, supposed to be 100% online. This is so we can get some FaceTime. If you have problems, you can bring them in here. This week, I'm doing kind of a more formal presentation. In the future, it's Future Thursdays. It's going to be driven by what you need, what questions you bring up, right? It won't be a formal presentation. That'll be on Blackboard, as we're about to see. So these are the announcements. The next thing that's probably of some use to you is my contact information is there. Probably email is the best way to get to me. You can also get to me through the discussion board. I check the discussion boards regularly. You have my email on there. You can also, and like I said, within 24 to 40 hours, I'll get back to you, usually much sooner. A copy of the syllabus is there. Syllabus has a schedule for the entire course. has the textbook, has all the information, what we're doing from week to week. It also has the readings. Now, I neglected to put the readings up on week 1 because I left it on the syllabus. In the future, I'll put, like, including with the videos, I'll put what the readings are for that week as well. So you don't necessarily have to go to the syllabus to find that. But the syllabus also has the academic calendar, so you know what days the school's open, closed, when there's tuition due or something like that kind of stuff. Next thing that's on here is class materials. Okay, the tab on the left. Now, if you look at the class materials, it gives you links to where you can download and download a copy of the textbook, or where you can order printed versions of it if you want it. It's for as low as, I guess, $7 or $8 or something like that. Next thing is spreadsheet software. In other words, that just lets you know we're going to be using Excel. We need you to find somewhere you can find that. There are a couple of free versions of spreadsheet programs. I think OpenOffice, I think it's one of them. There's ways to get around that. But I think most people pretty much can find a way to track down a copy of Excel that they can use. SPSS, as I mentioned before, you can either do the virtual online version of it, or you can actually rent it for 6 months for about $40 or $45. And that gives you some information on how you access it. Some students have told me they haven't had any problem running the virtual version of it, which is free, which runs over the internet. You work on, you open a window on your computer, and it's as if it's on your computer, but it's really on a computer in front of you. Right? The only problem with that is you need the internet connection. You can't run the program when you're not connected to the internet, and it could get a little glitchy every once in a while. So I encourage you to buy it if you can afford it. If you can't, that's always an option. And as we go through the semester, you'll get a little bit clearer about what you need to do it. You can also use R instead, or SAS, but that's unsupported. You can use that on your own. But as long as you can use it to do the statistics that we need, that's going to be fine. Okay, so now what happens from week to week? Well, we go into weekly sessions. Each week, a folder will appear. Right now, you only see 2 folders. Right? You only see the 2 weeks that I made available. Right? But for instance, on week 1, what happened? Week 1, you had that introductory video that I made up. I don't know how many of you actually looked at it. I didn't track it or anything like that. Right? But week 2 is actually where we got into doing some actual work. Now, I made it a bit more. It's because it's the first week and there's a lot of new stuff on there. It's a little complicated. Future weeks are going to be a little bit less busy than this one is, right? And in fact, week 3, is going to be not anywhere near as complicated as this, because among other things, the rest of the 611 class is not going to meet next week because it's Labor Day, right? So it's going to be kind of like a modified version of week 2. So on here we have various videos. Each one of these things is a video. Now, the video that you're going to see here that we're doing right now is going to be, I think we started about 4:30 or something like that. It'll be about an hour long. The conventional wisdom, if there is conventional wisdom in online courses, is that after 7 minutes, you people have your head on the desk and you're gone. Right? That's the conventional wisdom on this stuff. So they really encourage people to keep the videos short. The only problem with that is that really kind of breaks the whole thing up. So I think here there's even one of these videos that only 2 minutes long, I think, right? One of them, yeah, I think, yeah, something I did on the history thing. The thing on the history is like a minute and a half or something like that. It's really kind of silly. I really could combine that a little bit more. And I think I will combine them into longer videos, and I'll give you time markers. So I'll tell you, this is where I talk about this topic. It's at 10 minutes in or 15, but I'll try and keep them all under a half hour, sure. So there'll be multiple of them, but maybe the longest a half hour, maybe 45. And if you'll know that this goes from the beginning to minute 10, so you can watch that and then come back to and know you picked up at 10 minutes or something like that, kind of like putting a bookmark or something like that, although not really a physical bookmark. So you know where it starts. So there's a bunch of videos here. And then what I did is I put in the next item here. If you go through it vertically, you'll do it in the way I meant to do it. Okay, exercise one. Exercise one was just a couple of quick questions on the material that was in the lecture. That does two things. Number one, it gives you a chance to stop and assess your progress. And number two, it tells me if there's a problem. It tells me how fast you're progressing through this stuff, right? And I can either be happy or alarmed, one or the other, right? So I can go back there and I can figure out, well, people have not, they're getting through session one, but this quiz number one, but then the other stuff that's here, not many of them are getting to quiz two. It's taking them longer to do that. So it gives me a gauge how fast you're progressing. Also, if you're getting, like 1 out of 10 questions right, I know I got to go back over that material. Either it's me or it's you, and I got to figure out what's wrong, right? So it really helps me to see you as you're progressing. That's really what those quizzes are for. They're not graded, and you go back and take them as many times as you want. Okay. What is graded is, and there's two quizzes here. When you get through here, at the very end, I'm putting additional videos or recommended videos. If you look at the very end, right now there are two videos there. Right. One video is a video of a presentation by this Dr. Hans Rosling, right? Come on in. Hans Rosling. It's a demonstration of a unique way of using graphics to present statistical information. It's really cool. You should watch it. It's really the first 7 or 8 minutes of it that I'd like you to see. If you want to watch the rest of it, it's up to you. It's one of these TED presentations. Right? It's a very cool way of using graphics because we're going to be using graphics to convey information as well. So I want you guys to be able to get a look at it and see how effectively that he used that. The other link over here is this presentation I'm giving you, which we only have an hour for right now. It's in more detail there in the 611. So if I do something in 611 that I think will help you out, I'll give you the link to that material too. Also, I may find that if somebody asks me, for instance, that, gee, somebody online just asked me, are there any instructional stuff or training stuff on SPSS? I can then add that down there as well. So that'll be supplemental stuff. Not necessarily that you have to do, but things that you might benefit from or you might be interested in. Okay. So you can. So it's pretty much the same, except maybe a little less complicated from week to week, as opposed to what you see here. Now, in addition to this, we're also going to have homework assignments. Okay, and right now there's only one homework assignment posted. I'm going to post one over the weekend. I'm going to make an assignment one up, right? Which will be the material we covered this week. Okay, which will be a little bit of this stuff in Excel. I might actually, if you look at the videos on there, you'll see we go through an example of Excel. I might even go through it quickly now if we have a little bit of time. But that'll show up there, that assignment with a due date on. This is the city program assignment. I put a due date of sometime, I think, December 19th. I just picked out a day at the end of the semester, right? It's not really a due date on it. You got to have it done before the end of the semester. However, I'm encouraging you to do it early because end of the semester, everybody's going to be busy, right? And they're going to want to get through this material pretty quickly. Yeah, you guys okay? Yes. Oh, it is free. I think what happened is that you inadvertently tried to register to get a certificate to be a trainer instead of take the course. You know what I'm saying? Like, in other words, you could register to become a trainer in ethics and human research rather than the actual course itself. I have every email I have is a user on there. The problem is once you're a registered user, you don't see the same stuff, right? So I always, to get a look at it again, they keep changing it, like the menus and stuff. So in order for me to look at it again, I have to make a new user up. So I got to make a new Gmail account and get onto the thing. Over the weekend, I'm going to go on there and I'll take some screen captures so I can show you the sequence that you should go through. Most people are not having a problem with it. If it's asking you for money, you're in the wrong spot. I suspect it's asking you for money because you're at a point, you're going into a version of it where you're getting a certificate to do some professional service or something like that, like be a trainer in that material, right? That's what I'm thinking is probably happening. But I'll go over the weekend. Don't pay anybody for it. Over the weekend, I'll go back over it and make sure it's okay. The other thing I have to check out is a lot of you guys may not necessarily be part of the CUNY system or in different programs, so I'm not sure which of you really need to take it. Yes?
So my question is about the assignment, the exercise.
Yes.
So the second exercise.
Yes.
Where we did the Excel file.
Sure.
The question is, okay, so I did it, and when I submitted it, or during the, like when you're doing it, it says that you cannot save this information. Like you must.
Oh yeah, I can't help that. What's going on there is that you answer, like, let's say there's 7 questions,
Right.
and you answer the 7 questions. You say submit, and you find out, oh, I got 6 of them right. Great. Now I want to go back and fix it. It doesn't let you.
Right.
Yeah. Once you've submitted, you're out of business.
But then
You can go back and do it as often as you want.
Oh, you can go back and.
Yes, you got to
Okay.
start. So you should write your answers down, right? Either write your answers down or print it out or save it as a PDF file, right? But it won't save your. In other words, once you hit submit and see the answers, it won't let you go back in and just change that one question. And I'm glad you brought that up because my policy with the homework is it's a tool that I can use to make sure everybody's keeping up.
Right.
Yes.
So these exercises are just for like us practice. They're not like homework.
Those exercises, and even though you see, the only reason you see point values on there is because it requires me to put a point value in, right? But no, the quizzes are just for me to see how you're progressing. The homework assignments are graded, right? And the homework assignments are in this other tab, homework assignments. They're not part of that list. The one you're talking about is just a quiz. It's just for you guys and for me to know that you understand it and stuff. Okay?
Another question I have
Yes.
is that for that particular exercise, I got everything correct except for the percentile.
Oh yeah, that trips everybody
I
up.
was like, weird, like, how can I get the SC right and then not?
Oh,
okay. And I did your method. I mean, I did the method.
Right. Okay.
And it still went. It was like off by maybe like a couple of points. A couple of numbers. And I'm like, and when I saw the answer, I was like,
Yeah, that's interesting. You know what you could do is if you're doing it in Excel, you could save the file and you could send it to me.
okay, I did
And
save it.
yeah, and you can email it to me and I'll see what you did.
Okay.
Okay, I'll see if you did something unusual then.
Thank you.
Okay, because it's possible. I could get it wrong too. I mean, there are times when whatever answer I've calculated, sometimes it's wrong. Usually, I get alerted to that pretty quickly. Because I'll see a couple of people get it wrong. Yes. We're going to have 8 homeworks during the course of the semester, so it's basically every other week. Okay, that you'll have a homework assignment. There'll also be a project at the end of the semester as well. The project is likely to be something. Have you ever seen a poster session where somebody takes, does a study, and they put, what the topic was, what they researched, some background, kind of like basically a short report on a poster board, and they put it up at a conference, and people go down an aisle of these hundreds of these posters, and they look at, oh, this guy's working on this, and this guy's working on that, and if they find something interesting, they stop and they ask them about it. So it's basically going to be kind of like a poster board. Don't worry about it now. As we get to the second half of the semester, we'll really start looking at it. Okay, there'll be 2 exams, and the exams are not cumulative. The first exam will cover whatever it is up to that point, and the second exam will be from that point on. So now the homeworks. The reason why I really want to talk about homeworks is because what I do with the homeworks is that in order to make sure people are keeping up, and this course is one of those things where what you learn one week becomes a basis for what you do next week. So it's important you keep up. So if you, on any given, for instance, I'll post a homework over the weekend, and you'll have probably a week to get it done. If you attempt the homework before the due date, right? Even if you get 90% of it wrong, right? If you attempt the homework before the due date, any time in the semester you can go back and do that homework again. So essentially that means if you just try the homework for that week, just not blow it off, just try it, that means you can always go back and do it again. And trust me, when you get to week 8, the stuff we're doing in week 1 and 2 is going to seem simple, right? So that means basically you're going to get 100% on the homework as long as you keep up, right? And that's 30% of your grade. right? So that means that if you have a problem on a test or something like that, that goes a long way to making up for that. Right? So it really is important that you keep up, especially an online course, because I'm not there aren't that many of you guys here, and probably won't be in the future. In fact, we're not even really here. This is an online course, right? So we don't when you don't have a lot of face time, it's hard to discipline yourself. If you know you got to be classroom every week and keeping up with the material, it's a little easy to be disciplined. Online courses, that's the hardest part of online courses, is staying disciplined and really keeping up with the work week to week. So I'm kind of like structuring this, so I kind of almost force you into that. Okay? But on the other side, on the other hand, you also benefit from it as well. Okay, so now discussion groups. In the discussion groups, I think the week zero, which what I call week zero, I asked you to fill in click into, there's different, what they call threads here, different forums here, right? And you can click into these different forums. This one is general. So I can tell right here, for instance, I have 3 posts that I haven't read. I checked this about 2 hours ago. So those posts came up in the last couple of hours. Right? So I try and get to them every day. And these are posts that if there are questions, you can answer other students' questions. And there have been. Some people have talked about installation issues on SPSS and some other things. These are general posts. I created a forum for let's introduce ourselves, and that's kind of an assignment, so that you go on and introduce yourself and also respond to 2 others. Like say, even if it's just to say hi, or to say, hey, listen, I worked at the same place a couple of years ago. There's also week 1 class materials, exercises, and quizzes. If you have a question about that, that's a good place to click in there. If you click in there, you can create a thread, right? You can say, how do I log, or maybe I'll just call the title will be city program. There we go. I don't even have to type it in. And city program, is it free? Okay, and I'm going to submit that. Now someone else can then add to that thread, can answer that question. Or if no one else does, I can answer it as well. So you guys can support each other, right? Remember, no man left behind. We're all going to get through this course together, right? So that's another valuable source of exchange of information, especially the kind of stuff that people are struggling with, because you can post something there. So that right now there's a forum for week 1 class materials, and there's a forum for SPSS and virtual software and student versions. So if you have problems installing it, nobody's posted on those yet. If you have problems installing, you can go there and post a question, like, where do I find the registration number? Do I get an email, or how do I get it? Right. So you can click in there and create a new thread with a question on it. And I'll be adding each week. I'll be adding a thread for that material that week. If the material really extends over to 2 weeks, and kind of the topic for those 2 weeks is put kind of the same, then I'll just make 1 thread for that week, so you guys know where to look for information a little bit easier. Okay, so that's what we're doing there. There's other resources and so on and so on, so online student resources and so on and so forth. Any questions? Yes.
The idea of SPSS.
Yes.
I have a question about which you choose, the local or the Unicode.
Oh, that's a good question. I said
that.
Unicode. I'll tell you what that's about.
I called the company.
They said Unicode.
Said,
on their bulletin board, they say Unicode. I'll tell you what the difference is. The difference is the way that it stores text information. And if I create a file in local code and give it to you, and yours is set up for Unicode, it'll give you a warning that there's a problem with the file. I think it'll read it anyway, but it'll give it a warning. Worst comes to worst, I could do it both ways. You can actually change the setting after you've installed it. You go into Edit, Options, Languages, and there's a place where you can switch between local and Unicode, right? So you can actually change it. People have told me to use Unicode. I'll tell you why. because Unicode is where the other IBM products are all going. Old style was Unicode, new style is, I'm sorry, old style was local, new style is Unicode. You can put, if you put local in, I don't think you'll have any problem opening Unicode files. I think if you put in Unicode, you might have a problem, but most of those files are going to be coming from really older versions of
So you go
SPS.
back.
Yeah, you can change the form, you can change it. Plus, if you have a real problem with it, I'll figure out some sort of way to save the file in both formats and so that everybody can open it. You know, so I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. If anybody's installed it, and within the first week or two, we'll figure this out because you know whatever somebody will say that it's not working when I open it, it doesn't work, and when we figure out what that person's got installed, we'll know. Right? But there is a way to switch back and forth, switch the default. Okay. So, in fact, I'll show you. I think why not? 524. Now, you know, at 5:30, I'm going to bolt because at 5:30 I have to be over at 119th Street for a lab class. So if you see me pack my stuff up and make a run for it, you'll understand. What's that? Oh, let's see. Is there general thought? No, when you have a question. You know, again, keep an eye on the discussion forums. If you have a question, if you're having an issue, post it there. If you think it's something that you can feedback from other students will help you with, post it there. And occasionally go through it. You may find a question that you can answer that another student has to get answered. I use, because there is really no, our real course here is online, the 10% for student participation, the only place I can get that from is the discussions groups. That's why if I'm pretty lenient with that, but it helps if you post every once in a while to discuss, at least keep up with the discussions groups. Okay, let's see. Cancel. If I go to edit, options, if you go to language, see over here, Unicode or local writing system, right? You can choose which one that you want as your default over there. This one happened to be on Unicode. I guess that's what I was using last semester. Okay. So I'm not sure it makes that much of a difference right now, but you want to know something. If they told you that, it's probably because that's less likely to cause you an issue and less likely that you would call them up and annoy them again. So if they told you local, I would probably go, even though on mine it happens to say Unicode, I would go with what they tell you because.
It's strange that the default is Unicode.
Yeah. Yeah. No, if that's what they suggested, it's because my thinking is if the guy's on the helpline for IBM, his task is to make sure you don't call back again. You don't have a problem. So he's probably saying to himself, well, if I tell you to use local encoding, that means that chances are, no matter what you're going to do, it's less likely you're going to have an issue. Even though Unicode is the more modern way to do it, right? Even though it defaults, the newer versions default to Unicode. So I would go. I wouldn't worry about doing it either way. If there's a problem with it, like I said, I'll figure a way to make more than one version of the file. So any data files that we have. Okay, so I just wanted to go through quickly in the last couple of minutes. And like I said, I'm sorry, but I would love to hang around and chat, especially this week because I'm doing this so formally. We're not getting that much of a chance to really interact. But the objective from now on is when you come in here, come in armed with questions, because I'm not going to go over everything in do a presentation like this. I'm going to ask you what you guys are having issues with. If you have problems, people online have problems, I'm going to address those, right? And if you don't have issues, then I'll figure something that I know students in the past have had issues with that I think might help you out, and I'll just go on my own with something.